So the next panel is called BTC-Fi, Preparing Bitcoin for an Interoperable Future. So I'd like to welcome to the stage my good friend, Mr. Glassy. We have Nick from Arch Network. We have JJ from Ika. And we have Sheldon from Omnity and Periwinkle from Glittr. Please make your way up to the stage. And let's get a round of applause for our next panel. Amazing, amazing. I'm going to pass these off to these lovely folks. And let's get started.
Hello. Test. Yep.
Hello.
All right. Thanks everyone for being here, and to all my interoperable friends. Very much looking forward to this conversation. I think this is probably the area that I spend the most amount of time exploring and racking my brain to figure out how do we make a more cohesive ecosystem. Just doesn't make sense to have so many different villages when we're working on the same kind of grand mission. But let's just start with some introductions. I would love for you to, we'll do kind of like a speed round, let people know who you are, what you've been working on, and then I have some interesting questions. We'll dive deep into the different protocols that are up here on stage, and hopefully learn some things about interoperability. Would you like to?
Yeah. So I'm JJ. I've been in the Bitcoin space really since 2020. My earliest days was working in and around mining, hash rate, tokenization, and most recently, Ika.
I'm Perry. I've been in Bitcoin since 2011, which is a really long time. Throughout the years, various projects, academia, all sorts of things, kind of big tech, but now I am co-founder and CTO of Glittr. We're building a smart contract platform directly on layer 1.
My name is Nick Fouriezos. I am the CMO at Arch Network. We're taking all the things that Bitcoin was missing and we're building them so that you guys can do really fun Bitcoin DeFi natively. Yeah, my background is I'm a former Washington, D.C. correspondent turned Web3 marketer who wrote white papers for a bunch of companies, and now I'm spreading the good gospel of Arch.
I'm Sheldon from Omnity Network, and I've been around since a cybersecurity engagement in 2012. Great way to get addicted to Bitcoin is to see it at a really, really technical level from your existing field, right? Really happy that I got recruited to what's now called Omnity Network in 2021. And we've continued for the past 6 years to really push that multi-chain thesis. And now we're back home with Bitcoin, and that's going to be a really core anchor for us in a multi-chain thesis.
Let's go. All right, I'm gonna just ask a kind of a weird question, and I think you're gonna need a little time to think about it. So I'm gonna ask this question, but we'll answer this later, toward the end of the panel. And the question is, if interoperability was a superhero, which one would it be? Okay, but so just ponder that while other people are talking, and we'll loop back around. Let's talk about some things that you're excited about today. I think even like whatever 3 years ago, 2 years ago, we had a lot of hopes and ambitions, but they just a lot of them just felt so far away, or they felt completely constrained by custodial options. But so like now we've come a long way. I would say even in the last few months, certainly in the last year, we've come a tremendous distance. So I would love to just hear everyone maybe weigh in on things that you're excited about in this realm of interoperability, some major unlocks that are happening, and yeah, we'll just maybe keep on the same.
Awesome. Well, I'm going to shill Ika because that's where I was most recently doing BD. So we go mainnet in about a month. So Ika allows you to sign transactions on any network from SUI. It's an MPC blockchain without smart contracts. That's why the logic comes from SUI. But it will allow us to program Bitcoin via accounts. So there are a lot of very interesting things here around decentralized custody, vaults that you're working on, atomic swaps, and what I'm probably most passionate about, which is lending markets around native Bitcoin.
Yeah, actually a lot of what you've just said about what you're building can directly apply to what we're building at Glittr. Similarly, contract custody, all of these things. We're on testnet 4 now if you want to play with it. We're going to also mainnet sometime soon-ish. Um, but in general, I think that there's one thing to have interoperability within the Bitcoin ecosystem, which is something we're really prioritizing in our build. And then there's interoperability in a cross-chain ecosystem. In that space, I think there's a lot of promising development being done in like the BitVM world that, granted, I think is 2 or 3 years more of really hard, serious research away from being viable at scale. But your question was about what I'm excited about. So the academic in me says give it 3 more years and then BitVM bridges are gonna be like the coolest thing ever. But in the short term, what? You can still be excited. Yeah, I'm excited about it, but trying to be realistic about the timeline, yeah. Yeah, it's not here yet, but it's down the road. Give it a couple of years, I think we'll see it. But in the short term, I think it's really about just getting interoperability within the Bitcoin ecosystem. And again, I know that we've been talking about how do we bring runes and ordinals and other asset classes into our smart contract ecosystem? How do we get everything in the space working together? Because there are so many different things being built in the Bitcoin DeFi space, and they're all completely different implementations on a technical level. So trying to figure out how we kind of do the rising tide with all ships.
I am less excited and less bullish about composability across chains, actually. I think that it sounds good, but what I'm really excited about in contrast to that is the ability to connect the Bitcoin ecosystem, and specifically the way it's going to be able to unlock both programmable Bitcoin, which we've talked about a lot, but actually really making my Bitcoin productive. I want to do things with my Bitcoin, and what that's going to take is options that are fast enough to actually unlock Bitcoin DeFi, that are actually liquid, right? So composability, the ability to communicate with different apps and different liquidity sources, and the ability to do it in as native as a way possible with my native Bitcoin, with runes, with UTXO-based assets. So
Plus the security to feel okay.
plus the security that comes with all of that. Because the reality, and I don't mean to, maybe that's a little controversial to say. I know we have a lot of great conversations coming about, interoperability across chains, but I think my big concern about that is we're having apps enter our ecosystem who are like, oh, we're gonna be here, we're gonna be there, and the people who really want to invest in Bitcoin and that want to do really interesting things with their Bitcoin in DeFi, that is a bearish symbol for them. The projects that try to come to us and say, we want to be on Bitcoin with you guys, but we also want to be pulling liquidity from Ethereum, doing this, doing that, it's not exciting. And the reason why is because there's not demand on Bitcoin, or not demand for Bitcoin on Ethereum. Ethereum is Ethereum gas fees, and it's stable coins. So I'm really excited for making my Bitcoin more productive and finding new ways to do things on the base layer.
Sounds fair.
So I'm most excited about the larger Bitcoin community accepting some of the stuff that we've been pushing back on for a decade plus. Totally reasonable to say hey, we don't want to trust external parties or external systems. I respect that very much. But there's a lot coming back to tokenized UTXOs, direct L1 applications, and that doesn't have to take away from those other networks and those other products. It means that you can actually make a much easier separation between the two. So when I talk to developers about our new product that we're technically have already launched, but we're going to be helping people with in the next coming weeks, called the Runes Exchange Environment, it's basically just built of UTXOs. I have to retrain some smart contract folk on how to think about the identity of a transaction kind of living through that transaction and the lifetime afterwards, because they're used to GUI. They're used to extremely, uniform data structures that don't have the benefits of Bitcoin. So I think that there's a lot of uniformity that we're going to seek, and there's data standards and assets that we'll all kind of gradually walk towards as a group. But there's also a better appreciation for, hey, I want Solana as my solution because of this reasoning. Hey, I want Bitcoin as my solution because this makes more sense because of X. I'm seeing a lot more of that recently, and I've personally been championing that for years to almost no avail, and it's seeming like it's getting a lot easier in the past 2 years.
Yeah, like Bitcoin DeFi that works with Bitcoin instead of fighting against it.
Yeah.
Sorry,
Bitcoin DeFi that's native to Bitcoin, that is not trying to be Ethereum.
Like the UTXO-based thing, right? Like
exactly.
It's not trying to make Bitcoin ETH. Stop trying to make Bitcoin ETH.
Exactly.
It's
Agreed.
All right, here's another question. What kind of things, like, what are we up against? Like, what are the key challenges? Like, from a developer standpoint, from a technology, risk standpoint, centralization, that we don't have to go in the same order. Feel free to just jump on the mic. But yeah,
I'll
like,
take this one really quickly.
yeah, great.
I can direct people to Remix and Hardhat and all kind of silly Ethereum tools that live in a browser that someone can try and copy paste their way through and just fumble around and start to learn. That environment, it technically does exist for Bitcoin, but it's much less curated. It's not presented. There isn't a foundation who has a monetary incentive to pay to host that website and that service. So I think we're getting closer to a point where multiple Bitcoin companies will end up doing that sort of thing to make it easier for folks to see the value of building with UTXOs instead of just trying to seek an event system. Like I talk crap about Hyperledger sometimes because they did not curate their events-based system network. It is a network of systems. It's a silly buzzword, but anyway.
Yeah, I mean, I 100% agree with that. Going back to the very basis of it, look, Bitcoin is slow, it's clunky, it's illiquid, it's hard, there's no composability between apps, right? Because it doesn't have a VM, right? It has no native VM. So no native VM, limited scripting language, like all these things are the challenges developers have traditionally faced. We've created all these crazy workarounds. It's been exciting to see, and those workarounds are the building blocks that allow us to create things like what we're doing at Arch, what all these projects are doing. And so we got to remember, like, it's crazy because we are in the early days of programmability, similar to like when Bitcoin and Ethereum was, fighting to push out and build that, right? The great schism, right? And so we are now like early stage of that, but with the Bitcoin brand name and the Bitcoin liquidity. So we get to build in this early time. That's really exciting because if you could go back and redo it all, right? And go back to the early days, but somehow have all the strengths of the knowledge and the liquidity that you've built up over time. That's exactly what the Bitcoin programmability space is. And when we created Arch, it actually was trying to solve a much smaller problem for Liquidium. And our CTO discovered that, wait, you can actually do all this stuff in a really interesting and novel way. And so we were trying to create developer tools and then realized that you had to create this VM that could interact natively with Bitcoin. So solving those issues of slowness, clunkiness, limited programmability, that's exactly what we set out to do, and that's what's been critical.
I actually think some of those things are features more than they're bugs, to be honest.
To be fair, yeah, that's fair.
The speed thing I know is always a differentiator. It depends on what your use cases are. To your point about like if you want Solana, just build on Solana, right? If you want centralization in half-a-second blocks, like go for it. That's not what I want. It's not what I designed for in my work. True. That said, some of these things are difficulties. They're difficulties, but I don't think that there are things we need to necessarily overcome or over-engineer around. I think they're things that we've had to work really hard to make go along with what we're building, right? To find better ways potentially to do UTXO management, to do things that are still native to UTXOs, to continue avoiding bringing all of the compute off-chain, to just export to a VM, because I think this is part of like what I view it is like if it's faster than block time, is it really layer one, right? Is like how I would see it. But that doesn't make it not challenging. And I think it is a lot of this mental reframing into the way that you were just saying is like, how do you get people that are used to doing smart contract development and they're used to writing Solidity, they're used to writing Rust, right? And then we say, okay, but now you have to structure it a different way. Getting developers onboarded, I think, is harder when it's this new mental model.
Yeah, I mean, to that end, I mean, there's just not a lot of templates, right?
Exactly.
Like, people are doing things for the first time, and it's not just a programming issue, it's also a model issue. Like, how do the funds flow, right? Like, when you're designing, like, lending applications or atomic swaps, you have to really rethink, like, how things move. And you're talking to developers, and so really it's a different class of developer because these people are willing to rethink everything from the ground up and realize there'll be a lot of hurdles, right? And there'll be a lot of difficulty, but the end result will probably be very satisfying. I'm not a developer, but I would imagine as someone who likes puzzles,
totally.
right? You know?
Yeah.
I got to chime in on that really quickly because I tried to like hint on this point earlier, but I have to say this out loud. Competing on asset standards and data standards is really hard, but it's also the thing that has to be happening now.
Right.
Right? there's a reason why we all would, benefit from having a singular standard for how PSBTs are handled. There's also a very overt reason why none of us are doing that right now, and we're all trying to make our own, best handling for assets, UTXO data in general. If we all use the same format for tokenization of UTXOs, we'd be in a totally different, impossible utopia right now. So instead of trying to aim for impossible utopia, we should just keep having these discussions about what asset standards are productive.
Yeah, but that's why Bitcoin will always be Bitcoin.
Of course.
And speaking to what you were saying, these other ecosystems have developed developer tracks, right? I mean, as well as, Solana has Anchor, right? Which makes it a lot easier to code with native Rust, right?
Well, and you're held through the whole process, right? From
That's
beginning to
right.
end. And you come into Bitcoin, I mean, especially like sort of 2 years ago, right? And you're just like, you're totally out in the weeds. I'm not a developer. I couldn't even imagine like starting on a lot of these tracks,
I've been
right?
studying, what Solana has done to really incubate their developer ecosystem, and so that we can create similar ecosystems for our builders in Bitcoin who are doing so much, but it's like slogging through the mud, and let's just get rid of the mud, right? And one of the things that they've done really smartly is, like, just last week or the entire month of February, they had this event called Mountain Down in Salt Lake City. They just like do a hackathon for a month, basically. Everyone's just working together as an ecosystem. Everyone's building, and you get free food, and you hang out in a WeWork, I mean, it's pretty great. And then they immediately turn that into, their Coliseum grant funding program, and, basically their incubator, right? And I think if we can create more developer tracks, but this is so young that, of course, that hasn't emerged yet. So that's what we've got to do.
Yeah, and I do think that optimizing for developer onboarding is critical. That's definitely something we focus on a lot. Like, actually, when you go to build on Glittr, people, it's again this like, how do you think mentally about a smart contract? It's like, oh, is it Rust? Is it Solidity? I'm like, well, actually, it's a library. You just import, like npm install, import a library, and you're just writing TypeScript functionally if you're going to build on our platform. And we've made that choice very intentionally, both for efficiency reasons, for technical reasons, but also because we're trying to think about not just how do you go and poach people from other ecosystems, but how do I go and host a hackathon at a university for a bunch of people who've never built in Web3 before? You're a sophomore in college, and I could just say, well, just download the library, bro. Like, new contract, what kind of contract, what kind of, like, it's, and I think that those things are going to be necessary as well as we try to get more, not just builders from other spaces, but builders that are not in crypto, right?
Yeah, but I think there's also something to be said for fewer, better builders, right? Like, by the hurdles being higher, the people who stick around, like, really have a much deeper interest, So I don't know if the same can be said for the whole of Web3.
Ideologues are difficult to debate with on asset standards. I'll just say that.
This is true, but this is why it went from opcat to reinitiating all the opcos and then like nothing. And, Bitcoin sort of has a community of people who are reliably sort of intangible with each other.
Yeah, but I think there's a huge difference between like the core devs and then, like not to FUD anything, but like look at the UI on Pump Fund. That's like the crappiest thing I've seen in a million years. And we love it. And they make billions of dollars, and that's not an insult. And that's
like
the point.
Charm, right?
That is the charm. No, completely. 100%. Like, this is a compliment, right? But it is also like you could have built that in a hackathon in a day and a half, right? Like, it's not. It's actually not that complicated to build something like that. And so I think that's part of it too. Is like I'm too old for this shit sometimes. Like, I want to go and get whatever new Gen Z kid comes up and says, like screw it, let's go. So. And then you end up with really cool apps sometimes. Yeah, obviously I don't want them
Skippity.fun. That's all I have to say
Ohio.
about that.
Skippity, is that?
That's some Gen Z thing.
So I think alongside this, though, the cool thing, we talk about the difficulties and the challenges, but the cool thing is that if you're creating some random new chain, you have to have a breakout app or like something integral.
Exactly.
Yeah, like speed. Everyone's competing on speed, but like, there will always be a faster product. Like, eventually you have to have like a breakout app that's like brand new. Solana this cycle is Pump.Fun. Of course, they've had other breakout apps in the past. But on Bitcoin, the really exciting thing is, as hard as it is to build, and as we're trying to make that easier, but it's a green field. Like, the first functioning, solid, non-order book, more AMM-based DEX is going to have a huge opportunity. The first perps DEX that can do some things natively on base layer is going to be, a huge winner, right? And so when you think about in others, the copy-paste playbook for like all these EVM L2s, like, oh, we're creating an,
Are we doing the Bitcoin LT thing now?
Oh, I mean, I'll go all day on that. I'll go to all day on that. I'll go all day. When we're talking about composability, like it better be like composability with like as close to base layer apps as possible because like I don't think the L2.
Because I think we've got like an hour or two on Bitcoin L2s.
Yeah.
We have a whole roast on this just the other day.
That's right. Look, I mean, in liquidity, we talk about composability, but liquidity is going to be what picks what standards win, right? And so we will have a standard emerge, but it will be based on who can bring actual liquidity into this space and have it work interoperably and fast with other apps in that standard.
We also have a lot of different blockchains connected to our bridge. That's like a high trust Bitcoin to low trust other environments. I'm hoping that with the following questions, y'all might pick on me a little bit for that because that's why I'm here.
Okay. This is actually where I want to get into a little bit more of a technical, like, everyone has a very unique approach, like a very innovative, like, breakthrough idea, or maybe it's not a breakthrough idea, but it's a way of solving this in a very substantial way, light clients. I would love for you to maybe just give a breakdown. What is it? Why are they powerful? And why is that the kind of the solution that you've gone with? So
at Omnity, that's been our thesis for about 6 years, is that if you want blockchain products to work with other products, you have to have some minimized tooling that will do the basic necessities that you're trying to achieve. In most of our work, that's mint, lock, burn. That's trying to issue assets in a reasonable and acceptfully trustless manner. I could say trust minimized, right? But pinning that to Bitcoin has been the easiest business decision for us to make as a company, because trying to establish interoperability between two different economies that have these ventures backing them, that have these like Solana level dedications for developer growth. Oh, hey, one of them had great developer growth and the other one didn't. Are we going to see this like, lopsided lack of liquidity and lack of activity on one of those chains? So instead of trying to overcommit with, intense full node stuff, shout out Thorchain for trying, and many other networks like XP, instead of trying to do it this sort of like over bulky method, we've been really focused on light client development so that we could bring a lot of that value back to Bitcoin. Bitcoin has always been the original blockchain. We always knew that we would bring that work back. So combining full nodes for Bitcoin and light clients for other chains really has made the most sense for our business, because we see those economic opportunities on a Solana and on an Ethereum where people didn't do good solution engineering, where they were just, they were chasing a grant or they were pursuing some template that someone else showed them, and they didn't see that UTXOs would have saved their product so much time and effort. Like, there is an EIP that took years to come out from, I think it's Wi-Fi, YFI, and that was just to try to track and trace fungible liquidity as it went into pools. UTXOs do this by default. We're going to have an easier time recruiting some of those people back to Bitcoin by showing them, hey, these things are possible. Asking them to completely lift and shift their business and abandon the old stuff is, I think, a really difficult proposition. But having light clients that say, hey, you can sort of retain the legacy version of your business and build the new version in greater security with more ease on UTXOs, like, it's a long talk and I won't ramble more about it. But realistically, having UTXOs on Bitcoin as the core, as the anchor, makes it very easy to have like this high trust to other trust environment where Bitcoin is just always prime.
Wonderful. Yeah, I would love for you to jump right in.
Yeah, about the Arch side of things.
Yeah, exactly, like the innovation. And
so exactly what you said about UTXOs being at the core of it, it's what unlocks the ability to have native asset transfer and the ability to actually have a more native experience. And that's exactly what we've done. So we created a basically like a fork of the Solana VM, but we actually made a custom VM through that made it compatible with UTXOs. And what that allows us to do is real-time mempool indexing, where, on the Bitcoin block, all this activity is happening, and within our smart contract execution environment, we are able to actually speed up the process, move up the activity, have the trader, swapping assets in an AMM environment, and maintain state, an anchored state with Bitcoin transactions through us pre-confirming transactions within our network, and also through that mempool indexing, right? And what that, you can call it like a parallel environment in some ways, but what that allows us to do is have people do it with their native assets, you can speed up the activity, speed up the transactions, operate as a trader would in this case, totally trustless with Bitcoin. You're not taking on extra trust assumptions. Of course, if the smart contract doesn't go through or something like that, you have to trust that to execute. But if it doesn't, you haven't lost anything, right? There's no extra trust assumptions. So you go through that process. If for some reason the Bitcoin block doesn't settle, and this is very different than like an L2 where it's like own VM and it could exist without it. Like we actually can't exist, our VM can't exist without the Bitcoin base layer settlement because it's an active communication with it at the same time. And so with that note, basically, if it doesn't confirm, we create this really novel rollback feature that allows us to, we're tracking the chain reactions. If it doesn't settle in that block, it just rolls it back. And so that allows us to have
To the
Bitcoin
next block?
finality. It rolls back within the Arch execution, so it doesn't actually happen on the Bitcoin base layer.
Back.
Yeah, exactly. And that allows us to do a lot of really interesting things, including, again, talking about composability. A big part of that is going to be cross-program invocation, which is not something that most native stuff can do, and also an L2 can do, but it can't do it with Bitcoin, right? So we can actually have, if you're working through the Arch VM and through the execution environment, you can actually, in the middle of a program, invoke smart contract instructions with others. That's going to be key to making this liquidity flow between apps.
Wonderful.
Yeah, so like I think I said this in kind of your first question, I think everybody who's building something in this space is totally different design. And that's okay, it's different priorities, right? So we've prioritized for making sure that it's not custodial, it's not a multi-sig. We've prioritized for making sure there's not an off-chain VM. With Glittr, it's pre-computed client side and then affirmatively committed to. Contracts are declared in UTXOs in op return. Contract calls are declared in UTXOs in op return. Contract-to-contract calls are possible. Everything is done, though, directly with all data on layer 1, all execution directly on layer 1. And then using other asset formats involves invoking what is structurally like a lightning channel. And I know we've had so many conversations about this, right? Which allows you to have something that is still self-custodial when you bring liquidity into the Glittr ecosystem and can then deploy that capital in whatever manner of dApps you want, into whatever contracts you want. And then you have access to a unilateral exit because it's verifiable through the consensus of the indexer network. And I think, like, from our perspective, what is really important there is that the trust principles that are involved in providing liquidity to this ecosystem are functionally the same as the trust principles of the Lightning Network. And I view that as a pretty comfortable baseline, and I get that feedback from Maxis, from Whales, from other people. People don't necessarily use Lightning because it's a use case for fungible small amounts of money, and the Bitcoin whales don't really do that. But, and even core devs have said to me, like, okay, this is maybe one of the few things I've heard that I think I could actually put money in because it is, like, you're not giving up custody of your Bitcoin in this system. And it, I think, provides that. It comes with other trade-offs, but I think from my perspective, that's how I think we will access liquidity, or at least deep liquidity, is to go to the people who have a lot of Bitcoin that is currently absolutely not liquid, and being able to convince them for the first time to allow any of it to be liquid.
Yeah, I think we talked about this earlier, it's like the trust threshold, Like at what point do, like, even us on stage be willing to take our Bitcoin out of cold storage and like put it to use, right?
I mean, seriously, when we started, it was like, I want Bitcoin DeFi that I would use.
Right,
Yeah.
and this is what I've said, in my sort of semi-ecosystem sort of role, is like, I wanted to work with people doing lending applications because I wanted to borrow against my Bitcoin.
Right.
And I'm not going to do that in a centralized capacity. I don't think anyone in this room would. And I'm absolutely not going to wrap it, right? Certainly not WBTC. But anyway, in terms of Ika, I think, we're all sort of more or less doing the same thing, but from different angles. Ika's approach to it is sort of more like account management. So the novelty to Ika as an MPC network is 2PC MPC. So there's a divide between the network share and the user share. So the network itself is non-collusive, and that means that the network itself is not a honeypot. So compromising the network doesn't mean that you can sign transactions on people's behalves. So that's kind of what was brought to me initially when I met one of the co-founders at a party, and he's sort of telling me this at like 2 in the morning over the speakers. And I'm like, oh shit, well, we could now create environments where I could borrow against my Bitcoin. Bitcoin is at any risk, and it's native, and it's technically in my custody. So the other portion of that is the ability to trade accounts like via smart contracts, so that we could do Bitcoin transactions without hitting Bitcoin mainnet. And to me, that's sort of interesting because, you know, we've always had these theoretical talks in the past of like, what's virgin Bitcoin, what's green Bitcoin, but that starts to get a bit messy once you start moving it around. And if you could keep like virgin Bitcoin in an account, you could transfer that. It also creates a more interesting like liquidation scenarios. But anyway, so.
Wonderful. I have a feeling we're coming up on time, so I would like to do two things. One, if you have an answer for what the superhero would be, if we could embody interoperability into a superhero, which one would it be? I would like to hear that. And I would also like to have everyone just say, maybe there's a call to action, some things that are up and coming, you want to announce a points program, any of those kind of calls to action. We'll run through it like that. Maybe we'll keep that same order. You want to jump in?
Sure. So call to action for us is look out for the Bitcoin DeFi environment that we're launching in the coming weeks. Our Bitcoin DEX is built on it, so it's technically already in prod. But we're going to be very happy to welcome developers into a environment where UTXO-based development is more comfortable, a little bit more familiar. We are not pretending to compete with Glittr. It is a different product.
Yeah, we've had a lot of conversations about working together, actually, so.
We'll definitely be discussing some interesting integrations over there. But on the Runes Exchange environment side, that's a lot of UTXO handling that we want to see people get used to, not account model stuff. So I think that's going to be really great. We're also making upgrades to our bridge all the time. The core protocol is audited. We're going to keep that the same, and we're just going to try to rope in more people who didn't do solution engineering when they launched their blockchain product. It's very common, you know, people get excited. So I really wince at the property of having to introduce a superhero to represent something as vast as a 100,000 node network. But if I absolutely had to, I think I would pick the Green Lantern for interoperability. If you don't know, Green Lantern is one of the core of Green Lanterns, and the Lantern is just one of a number of other emotion-based power rings. So the idea that the willpower ring is what actually makes all these things possible means that there has to be enough Green Lanterns fighting to make interoperability seem reasonable and not just like someone throwing a tantrum.
Okay.
That's a tremendously good metaphor.
Yeah,
I got to go first. It was so easy, you guys. Thank you.
I didn't know anything about Green Lantern, and
You're
except that
welcome.
Ryan
That's
Reynolds
like-
bombed it. So, like, you know, I appreciate that.
That's significantly
That's-
deeper than the movie.
That's
Yeah.
amazing.
I like DC. Sorry, guys.
Yeah, I love it. I love it.
It's better than my answer for sure.
Yeah.
yeah.
I think
You-
some
you-
cross. Yeah, sorry. Fantastic Four, like, was it Elastaman or whatever? Like, see, yeah.
Hey, there
we
you go.
Flexibility.
Flexibility,
Yeah,
sure.
flexibility, composability, you know, and then I would also say like the Hulk, because once we actually get that interoperability going, the liquidity that's going to pump into the system is going to be massive, and we're all going to look like we've got some sick biceps.
So we're all
that's my
sticking with
superheroes analogy. I'd say for a call to action, look, build in Bitcoin. You know, the opportunity is so vast. I touched on this earlier, but like, you know, you don't have to reinvent the wheel. You know, there's such a great opportunity, and we see that opportunity. And you know, specifically, we've seen that the builders who have succeeded the most with us, we're open to Bitcoin builders, people who are from the Solana ecosystem, who are like playing with Bitcoin. Like a lot of projects are coming out and doing that. Those are the two that have been most successful in integrating with us. And we actually have a program right now where for the most bullish founders and people who are like have shown themselves to be great builders, we want to give you guys all the support to make it happen on Bitcoin using Arch, which means everything from like DEXs, from perps, from you know, basically anything that has existed on Ethereum or Solana that you think could be successful on Bitcoin. We want to talk to you, and we're going to support you with the right projects, you know, with the ones we truly believe in, with funding, with dev support, with tooling. We really want to make that happen. So if you are a builder in this space, especially if you're familiar with Rust already and, you know, excited about that opportunity, definitely talk to me.
All right. very vibes answer on the superhero. I think the first thing that came to me was Frozone, and I was just like, no, because he's got this attitude that's very like, y'all chill. We don't gotta.
Is that Marvel or DC?
Like
It's The Incredibles.
yeah, The Incredibles.
Okay. Oh, shit. All right, different universe.
Where's my super suit?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, precisely. I was about to say the same thing, but he got it. Yeah.
Depressingly behind on pop
Yeah,
culture.
like, and my answer here is purely about vibes. Like the interoperability thing, I view is this like, y'all like take a step back, chill, like let's build this together. Let's make sure we're building this right. Let's like support each other. I'm very kumbaya here.
He's
but
a great team player. As
he's
the
a great
nerd, I'll
team
say
player,
that, sure.
and I think that he's very like down to earth. And he's like, let's just get this shit done, right? And so this is my very vibe. You have a great metaphor. A very vibes answer here with Frozone. Call to action. Build something, obviously. Glittr is live on Bitcoin testnet 4, so it's permissionless. You can just go and build on it if you want to. If you want to build on our devnet, which has 1-minute blocks and is faster, you can request an API key. I'll get an email. I'll approve it, I promise. The repositories are public. If you want to add something to the protocol, you can submit a PR. We'll review them. So I really just encourage people to go and check it out. We have some bounties today at the hackathon. They've extended the deadline for those projects through the weekend. So if you want to go and build, like crack it out over the weekend, please do. Let us know. We're really excited to see people starting to build in our ecosystem. We don't have testnet incentives that are formal yet, but we will be announcing them soon. So come and follow us on Twitter and keep an eye out for that.
I'm going to choose a villain.
Ooh,
I like
spicy.
Doc Oct.
Ooh, okay. Yeah, the arms.
All right? Yeah, the arms. We should be going to Bitcoin, not forcing Bitcoin to go to weird places.
Yes.
All right?
Yes.
There's a Spider-Man metaphor in there. I gotta find that.
Multiverse, all of this stuff now, yeah.
Yeah.
Good
and
one, good
actually,
one.
actually,
There's only
Doc
one
Oct,
verse.
like turn good, right?
Right,
So,
yeah.
Yeah, Ika hits mainnet in the next month. I don't know. Go to the website, check it out. Yeah.
Beautiful. Well, I just want to thank you guys for having a lovely and spirited discussion on a subject that is interesting to see so many different technical solutions. I really appreciated your answers, how you were saying, like, not just jumping into what we're doing, but the design thinking behind it. Like, well, here are the priorities. So here's how we addressed it. And then through this sequence, here's how we arrived at the answer of what we're building. So I thought that was great. And again, thank you very much. Thanks to everyone that's here. And Mr. David Cash, feel free to jump up here. I think he's going to be moderating the next panel, and we'll get going in just a minute. So let's hear a round of applause for the interoperability panel.
Thank you.